this is going to be a no-treats budget.
If we're going to name this budget, I'd call it the sponge cake budget. There's nothing too exciting, there's nothing sexy in it.
Last Thursday, the National Party delivered their final budget before the election, and on the surface, it looked pretty boring. No giant tax cuts, no flashy handouts, and certainly no frills. In this video, I'll unpack everything you need to know, line by line, sorting through over 6,000 lines of spending. What we got on Thursday was exactly what you'd expect from a national-led government. Fiscal prudence and no-nonsense branding. And honestly, that's probably exactly what national voters wanted. For years, the message has been simple. Focus on the basics, cut the fluff, and get the books back under control. But here is where things get interesting. If you've followed the headlines over the past couple weeks, you'd probably assume government spending is being slashed. After all, we've heard constant discussion about public sector cuts, tighter budgets, and departments being told to find savings. Yet, when you actually open the budget documents and look at the numbers, a very different picture starts to emerge. This isn't a smaller government. This is the largest budget ever passed by a New Zealand government. Total spending is still increasing. Government debt is still increasing. And despite all the talk of restraint, the government is still spending more money than it earns. In fact, we're still running a significant deficit. If the government was a household, we're at the stage where they'd be putting the groceries on Afterpay. That's really the lens that you need to view this entire budget through. Because while the tone is austerity, the reality is that New Zealand still has a massive fiscal challenge on its hands. Debt has become more expensive to service, spending pressures continue to build, and an aging population means costs like superannuation and healthcare keep rising every single year. As you'll see later in the video, one of the fastest growing expenses isn't hospitals, schools, or roads, it's interest. Just the cost of servicing debt is now approaching $10 billion a year, money that doesn't build a single hospital, educate a single student, or fix a single pothole. It's simply the price of borrowing. So while politicians will spend the next few months arguing about where money is being cut and where money is being added, the biggest story is that New Zealand is still spending at record levels while trying to slowly work its way back towards balance. And that theme shows up again and again throughout this year's budget. So let's start by looking at the winners and the losers. The biggest winner in this year's budget might actually be Kiwi investors. For years, one of the biggest frustrations with investing overseas has been the Foreign Investment Fund, or FIF rules. Once your overseas investments crossed $50,000, you suddenly found yourself dealing with a much more complicated tax regime that many investors found confusing and intimidating. This is now changing. The government is doubling the 50 minimis threshold from $50,000 to $100,000. In practical terms, that means Kiwis can build significantly larger portfolios of overseas shares and ETFs before needing to worry about FIF calculations. It won't affect everyone immediately, but for regular investors building long-term wealth, it removes complexity, reduces compliance headaches, and makes investing globally far more accessible. If you want to skip the confusing tax laws, ShareSite can provide a FIF breakdown to supply your accountant, combining all your trades from all of your brokers. So if you want to check that out, make sure to check out my link in the video description. Now, while investors received one of the biggest wins in the budget, public servants may have received one of the largest losses. Since the pandemic, the size of New Zealand's public service has expanded significantly, growing from around 0.9% of the population to roughly 1.2%. The government is now aiming to bring that figure down to around 1%, reversing much of that growth. On paper, it sounds like a small change. In reality, it is expected to result in thousands of jobs disappearing across the public sector. With health and education still receiving additional funding, many of the reductions are expected to fall on back office, policy, management, and administrative roles, rather than frontline services. The government argues this is about improving efficiency, but for those affected, it could be one of the most significant changes in this year's budget. One of the more surprising policies in this year's budget relates to housing. National is often labelled the landlord's party, so you'd expect policies that support house prices. But this initiative arguably does the opposite. The government is incentivising councils to approve more housing developments, with the goal of increasing the country's housing supply. In basic economics, when supply rises faster than demand, prices come under pressure. And that's especially relevant right now because net migration has slowed significantly from the record levels we saw a couple years ago. For first-home buyers, more housing supply is generally good news. For property investors hoping for rapid price growth, it's a reminder that this government appears more focused on fixing housing shortages than protecting house prices. So this was a surprise that many wouldn't have expected. One of the quieter themes running through this budget is a shift in how the government thinks about education and careers. For decades, the message to young New Zealanders was simple: go to university and get a degree. But this budget suggests that may no longer be the default path. The government is doubling the number of trade academy placements, increasing funding for foundational learning, and funding the development of 8 new industry-linked secondary school subjects designed around specific careers and skills shortages. At the same time, it is winding back the university free fee scheme. Taken together, these policies signal a clear shift towards vocational training, trades, and industry-focused pathways. The goal is to get more young people into jobs that the economy actually needs. And moving along, more money's going into infrastructure. The government is aiming to reduce day-to-day costs of running departments while increasing capital expenditure, or money spent on long-term assets. That means more money flowing into hospitals, schools, police stations, courtrooms, defence projects, rail, and, of course, roads. Whether you agree with this approach or not, the strategy is fairly clear. The government is betting that better infrastructure will improve productivity, support economic growth, and leave behind assets that continue delivering value long after the money has been spent. Looking back, it's hard to imagine life in Auckland without projects like the Waterview Tunnel and the Waikato Expressway, for example. Now, another loser in this budget are the banks. The government is introducing a new levy on banks and insurers, effectively requiring the financial sector to contribute towards funding its own regulator. While this isn't unique to New Zealand and is already common in many comparable countries, it does represent an additional cost for the industry. Now, whenever a new cost is imposed on banks, there is always the question of who ultimately pays for it. Banks will argue those levies reduce profitability and their ability to invest, while critics will point out the sector remains highly profitable. Either way, the government's position is clear. Taxpayers shouldn't be footing the entire bill for regulating financial institutions that generate billions of dollars in profits every year. To end this section on a winner, let's talk about the new Gas Transition Loan Guarantee Scheme. The government will take on up to 80% of the credit risk for loans to businesses transitioning away from natural gas. The intention of this is to make banks more willing to lend on these types of projects and potentially lowering borrowing costs. During the pandemic, the government did something similar with BFGS to encourage business investment spending. This might sound niche, but it's actually tackling a real problem. New Zealand is facing gas supply shortages, and many businesses will eventually need to shift towards electricity. Rather than forcing businesses to absorb the entire cost themselves, the government is trying to make that transition easier. It's not the flashiest policy in the budget, but it may end up being one of the more practical ones. So overall, it's pretty boring. But when the government is already spending more than they earn, it would be hard to do much else. We, as taxpayers, are having to shrink our budgets with the cost of living crisis, oil prices going through the roof, and inflation and interest rates expected to rise later in the year. The only way for the government to fund more than this would be to raise taxes or take on more debt. A couple weeks ago, I talked about stagflation and how hard it is to shake off. Targeted relief, careful monetary policy setting, and supply-side reforms around reducing red tape and increasing infrastructure spending are heavily cited as the main tools to tackle stagflation. Against that backdrop, I'm personally happy to see they aren't throwing carrots in election year to win votes. Yes, it's a tight budget, but they could have easily gone out, taken on billions in debt to increase their chances of winning this year's election. So what's the overall fiscal picture? In the 2026-27 year, the government expects to collect $153 billion and spend $184 billion. That means the government expects to take on $31 billion in debt to fund the budget. Revenue is expected to increase $8 billion and costs are expected to rise by about the same. So though it's advertised as austerity, the government got a pay rise and it's blown it all away. This is the financial reality of New Zealand's books. So this election year, when all the parties start dangling carrots, it's all being put straight on the credit card. So just keep that in mind. Let's start by looking into the government's income. It should come as no surprise to see the IRD accounts for roughly 80% of the government's revenue. The first, second, and third items are PAYE, GST, and company tax, followed by a list of other taxes and levies. What stood out to me was the expectation that businesses would pay 12.5% more in company tax than they did last year. Given that the company tax rate hasn't changed and company earnings are threatened by fuel prices, inflation, a weak economy, I'm not sure where this is coming from. Jumping back into the list, customs is another big part of the government's revenue, largely through the collection of GST and duties on imported goods. They're followed by the Treasury, which collects funds from state-owned entities like Kiwi Bank, interest on its reserves, and capital charges to other government departments. The remaining departments all bring in 2% or less of the government's funding, which includes things like RUCs, car regos, police speeding tickets, and the sale of carbon credits. If you want to dig into the numbers, I've included a link down below. Just pop in your details and I'll send you a link to my spreadsheet. Now let's take a look at the government's costs. I'll jump into my spreadsheet shortly, but I've found this neat link on the Herald that shows this breakdown easier. As you can see here, almost every department has received more money in this budget. Health is up, education, social development, housing, justice, defence. The only major exception is transport, as last year, they made a $1.6 billion injection into Auckland's City Rail Loop. So that shows how much each department is expected to receive over the coming year. Right at the top of the list of the expenses, we have New Zealand's largest cost, superannuation, setting us back $26.5 billion a year. This is growing by 7%, over $1.7 billion a year. And this is why so many are calling for an increase to New Zealand's retirement age. The second largest cost item is for hospitals and specialist health services. This costs around $16 billion a year to run, 8% of the total budget. The third largest cost to the government is KiwiSaver. As one of the nation's largest employers, they too need to make employer contributions into their staff's KiwiSaver accounts. This costs $12.35 billion a year, and with the latest increase to 3.5%, the bill is increased by about $1.7 billion. After that, we have primary and community health services, things like GPs, midwives, pharmacists, mental health, all the stuff that falls outside of the hospital network. This costs $10.3 billion, up 6.3% from last year. The next item is debt servicing, which is the cost to the government for all the debt that's largely accumulated since the pandemic and continuing to grow. Today it costs $9.7 billion a year, $1.1 billion higher than it was a year back. To put this amount into perspective, that's 4 times the amount spent on providing student loans every single year. So it's no small amount at all, and unfortunately, it's increasing. Along from there, we have teachers and the cost to operate the school system. Combined, these cost $12.9 billion a year. And at a little over $5 billion a year, we have the job seeker benefit, increasing just 1.5%, despite the data showing us unemployment is increasing. There are 830 other items on this list, so I'll highlight some of the most interesting items I found. Policing services cost $2.4 billion a year. However, this is expected to drop 2.2% from last year. National is known for their law and order focus, so maybe they took a leaf out of the Green Party's manifesto. Pharmac, our national drug buying authority, is getting another 2.6% in this year's budget, taking their annual cost to $1.8 billion. The Defence Force is getting a 19% pay rise to fund their asset base, in line with recent encouragement from the US and the uncertainty around the world today. There's also a further $562 million put aside for the super fund, so the government is borrowing money to dabble in the stock market on margin. Dunedin Hospital is getting $400 million this year to help with its construction, and there's $374 million set aside for school assessments, some of which will go towards the replacement of NCEA. A small line item relating to defence earlier is GCSB getting a bump of 38%, taking the annual budget to $344 million. Family Boost is getting a 20% increase as well, taking its budget to $168 million. So if you want to take a closer look, please check out the link in my video description. As you scroll down, you get to the smaller amounts, and there are some interesting things in there. A whopping $506,000 is going towards the domestic travel of former prime ministers, $782,000 so MPs can fly their families around for free, and $100,000 to the UN drug control program, whatever that is. So have a look and let me know what you find down below in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, please make sure to subscribe to my channel. I've created over 300 videos helping Kiwis manage their money and grow their wealth. I've also started posting over on Instagram, so give me a follow there as well. Check out these videos here if you want to see how your income, your net worth, and KiwiSaver balance compares to the average New Zealander. Thanks for watching, and I look forward to catching you on the next one. Cheers.